that make sure, again, that you're defining expense for your company properly. Yes, that new laptop, it's around Christmas, it's on sale. That could be an expense to your company. Make sure you're using it the majority of the time for work reasons.
You are listening to the Mindful Business Security Show, brought to you by Focivity, where we answer your questions and simplify information security for small businesses. Get the clarity you need to focus on the things that matter.
Hello, hello, hello. It's a great day, and I am glad you're listening. We're back yet again for another installment of our series of special episodes about starting a business. Don't worry, we'll get back to our normal call-in radio format soon. This is the fourth of 5 episodes on this topic. If you're just listening for the first time, I recommend backing up to the first episode in this special series so that you can start from the beginning. Joe Brinkley, the blind hacker, is back with me today, and we're picking up where we left off last time. So last time we talked a little bit about running the business. We're going to continue talking about running the business today. As you probably know, we both own security consulting companies, and we're approaching this topic from the perspective of starting a security consulting business. But everything we're talking about here today will apply to any kind of service business, at least, if not any kind of business in general, for the most part. So this should still be broadly applicable. Anyway, it's time to get the topic at hand, so let's go.
Do the cybersecurity risks to your business have you confused? Visit Focivity.com/podcast. That's FOCIVITY.com/podcast and sign up to be a caller on a future episode.
All right. Hey, Joe. Thanks for being back with me today.
Of course. Well, thanks for having me again.
Last episode has been well received, just like the prior ones. So I'm excited to jump in and kind of cover the second half of running the business today. So last time we talked a little bit about, your business plans and marketing and sales and leads, coming up with your rates, estimating stuff, contracts, negotiations, all those things. And today we're going to dive into maybe a little more of the tactical stuff of running a business. We'll talk about some of the tools and things that we use in running a business, or the types of tools that folks might want to have. Talk a little bit about functions in the company and what things you might want to outsource. And we'll talk a little bit about bookkeeping and kind of the basics of, business bookkeeping. So we've got a lot to cover again. Hopefully we'll be able to keep this down to an hour episode, maybe a little bit less, I hope. And we'll see where we end up.
Yeah, I mean, I think from the common tools, right? So when you're running the business, as you said, we talked about master services, coming up with pricing. And this is one of those things that the tools you're going to use to run your business are going to be, this is all going to be overhead. So you want to go cheap, but you also don't want to go cheap, right? There's the moniker, you pay for what you get. So, I'm going to we can kind of actually, though we, in our page here, we kind of spelled a lot of things out: email, phone, telecommunications, accounting, social media, e-signatures such as DocuSign and other such things, scheduling, bookkeeping, project task tracking, CMS, content management, customer management. I'll say, you really do in these sections pay for what you get, right? I don't know who you host through. I currently am still using Google Workspaces for my business, primarily because it's cheap, but has a lot of good services. I get an email, I get a phone number, I get teleconferencing, I get to a degree accounting, right? There's spreadsheets, I get a couple additional services out of it. There's things that when you start to think about this, right? when we put this in here, because the one thing that I see that like makes me cringe is when I don't have a problem calling and getting someone's cell phone. That's not been a problem I've ever had. Some folks want an 800 number. I've never had that problem. Again, I know that there's a slight generational gap between the two of us, or some years there. But so when I call a business, I don't need to call an 800, 900, or a number like that. I'm fine calling a number. It doesn't even need to be a 600 or an 000 number, right? I remember back in the day, like like businesses used to be like in my area, it was like 703, 600, or 500, or they all ended in 6,000, 7,000, and then sometimes they'd have the extensions. But the phone thing has never bothered me. But email addresses, right? I do not want to email accidental CISO at gmail.com for my professional
Right.
services. And while I'm being honest, that is the one thing that like cues me into, is AC the right, AC for me?
Yeah. And maybe, it's, tongue in cheek here with, accidental CISO at gmail.com, which is a valid address. It is mine. You can email me and say hi. But even if you're, Jane Smith, like, jsmith at gmail.com, like having that free domain, yes, it works. And it really depends on what your goals are for the business. Uh, but if you are trying to present as a business first and foremost, it is really important that you have your own domain. From a security standpoint, it's kind of important you have your own
Yes.
domain too, because if you don't own your domain, you don't own your address. So technically, Google owns accidentalciso at gmail.com. They could take that away from
Correct.
me, and I have no recourse on that. Like there's very little that I can do if I've got a problem with a free email account. Uh, so when you're starting your business, we talked in earlier episodes about diving in and what things you need and what things you don't, and like just start, get off the ground, start making some sales, and then once you've validated that yes, this is a business that can make money, then start spending some things on some of these business expenses like email and domains. Um, and I mentioned as we were talking about that, I jumped in, feet first, no parachute or anything in mind. So I went ahead and registered the domain, the email, the website, and I got all of that stuff set up from the get go. It's not super expensive, which is one of the nice things. Like you can get email through your hosting provider.
Yeah, for free most of the time these days.
Whichever, with Namecheap, GoDaddy, whoever you want. Like
Yeah.
if you buy your domains through Amazon or somebody like that, you may have to find another email provider. But if you're going to run as a business, one of the first business expenses that you're probably going to want to sign up for is that business email. That may be with your website. Uh, I host with Wix for my business site. Again, I'm not trying to self-host my website or anything like that. I strongly recommend that folks, and this is for all you the tech folks out there, all my nerds.
Yes.
Just because we can doesn't mean we should. And when you are starting a business, where your effort needs to be is on the business, not on messing around with setting up your website and self-hosting a website, locking it down, keeping it secure, keeping it updated, and all this stuff. Like point and click, baby. Wix, Squarespace, WordPress.com. Like use one of these platforms that hosts your website out there, uh, and set up your email. I like having the email be separate from the website. I see the website as a marketing tool. I see my email as a business critical application. So my email I want to have with Google Workspace, G Suite, whatever they're calling it now, because they keep changing things,
Yeah.
or Microsoft Office 365 or M365 or whatever they call it now, because they keep changing things. There's a pattern with these cloud services, but overall, Microsoft is going to host your email better than you. Google is going to host your email better than you. Wix is going to host your website or Squarespace or WordPress, whatever, better than you. So I strongly recommend you do that. There are other email providers out there. Like I said, when you register, GoDaddy will sell you a domain and they'll sell you email. I do want to caution you from doing email with your registrar like GoDaddy. I have heard, I don't want to call them horror stories exactly, but it can be very difficult to migrate out of a GoDaddy email domain into a Microsoft Office 365 domain if you decide to go that route, because if you have the GoDaddy like Microsoft Exchange in the back end, you can run into conflicts with that migration. And I've heard from several
Yep.
folks at different times in the last few years that has been a kind of a pain um, to do there. So as you're getting yourself off the ground, email is going to be one of the first things that you want to get up and running, along with your website, because they're going to add credibility. Uh, I don't expect that my website's going to make sales for me. That's just not my sales strategy, but it's there for credibility. If somebody looks at my business card, or I'm talking to somebody, or one of my channel partners mentions, "Yep, we're gonna bring in Fosivity, and you're going to talk to them about this project." If that potential client looks up my webpage, I want them to see something that presents as a legitimate company and represents me well. So it's still definitely worth having those things. So uh, anything I miss in that area, Joe? I know I covered a lot.
No, I agree. It's again, it's the thing that brings a little bit more legitimacy to early projects, early things. Definitely agree. Don't. I tried to do the self-hosting thing on my first company. I spent so much time trying to patch Joomla on a local install and make sure that my dynamic DNS was continuously updating, because then the site would go up and down, the emails would stop flowing in. Fortunately, they were, put on on the network, and then as soon as I'd reconnect, they'd all come flooding in, and things like that. But it's one of those things that adding that, again, just because I pooed on a phone, I was like, oh, Posha, you don't need a phone. Again, I did for when I built Next Gen Red Team, I did go out and buy a SIM card from a cheap eSIM provider and put it on my phone, so I do have a second number. But for the most part, on my business card and on the website is my main number, and that's just so because as the sole proprietor, I don't need to send you to an 800 number, have you reach a voicemail box when you could just reach me. So that, again, for your business, do what's best for you. But for me, that was what was best for me, is just reach out to me directly from that kind of perspective. So I just wanted to be fair. Just because I criticize it doesn't mean it's foolish.
Yes, and having a business phone as the business again takes off, like there's a credibility factor there as well. When you're out trying to make
Correct.
sales and somebody wants to call your business and you pick up, if the phone rings and you just pick up and say hello, they're not like, is this a business? Did I get the wrong number? Like there is kind of a credibility thing, I suppose, unless they know for sure, if they already know that they're calling your cell phone, then that would be expected. But if somebody's calling a business number and they don't get somebody answering, thank you for calling, whatever business, or these days, the menu, the recording thing, press one for sales, press two for accounting, whatever. Um,
Yeah.
it may make them wonder, like, is this a legitimate business? And again, optics for that legitimacy um, can be an issue depending on the kind of service that you're trying to offer. Um, if if I'm trying to offer virtual chief information security officer advisory services for my clients, I want to make sure I'm representing as professional as I possibly can for that, because I'm looking to
Fair,
talk to
fair,
business
fair.
leaders to sell to business leaders. Um, I'm not trying to sell to technical folks as often as I am to other business leaders, or at least like senior managers in an organization. And I feel like having that stuff in place, having a business line in place that you can answer a certain way. You don't have to have a recorded menu, but just to be able to answer the phone, you know, thank you for calling such and such a business. This is so and so. How may I direct your call, or how may I help you? Whatever you want to say. It's nice to have that dedicated line that you can tell when the call comes in that this is how I need to answer my phone. My wife uses Google Voice, works great. Even if you don't use the phone very often, it's free. As long as you make a
Yep,
phone call
yep.
with it every certain number of months, they keep it active. So you can start with that uh, pretty easily if you need a business line. Um, I use Zoom for teleconferencing. Um, Part of the reason I went with Zoom is because, like, consistently it just works overall.
Fair.
Teams has gotten much better. Google Meet has gotten much better over the last several years. I still have weird issues sometimes with the Google stuff with clients that use Google. Still run into weird stuff with clients with Teams every once in a while. It's become pretty rare. It used to be a really regular occurrence.
Also, yeah, sometimes I'll get your domain doesn't or isn't compatible with theirs, or they need to allow you access, and you're like, oh, come on.
Yeah. So Zoom just works for
Yep.
me generally. I've had one client that's had a problem joining a meeting once in the 2.5 years since I've been using it for my own business. So pretty good record on that for being reliable and working properly. What's really cool though is Zoom offers a phone service as well. So if you're looking for like company phone services, Microsoft offers this as what with one of their business tiers as well as part of Teams. Like you can get a corporate phone number with, direct lines and extensions and all that kind of stuff, and set it up with soft phones and use the Teams app. Zoom works the same way. I set up voicemail boxes. I set up extensions. I can set up. I've got the menu that does a recorded message when somebody calls, tells them what button to push, all that
Hmm.
kind of stuff. So it's a full featured business grade IVR. It's way easier to manage than the on prem solutions like the Cisco Call Manager and stuff that like bigger companies use, because it's a whole
Yeah.
career path just to manage that in and of itself. Um, that's another area. Like for my nerds, you don't need to run your own phone system just because you can. Um, if you're gonna like use a provider, and don't spend your business time and energy on that stuff. Focus on your business. Uh, Vonage is another good one. Um, yeah, there's a whole bunch of VoIP providers out there that you can
Yeah.
you can go with and give you that flexibility. And the other part of the other reason I went with Zoom is like the phone. When you're using Zoom Phone, it's the same app that I already have installed for the Zoom client for meetings. It just adds a
Uh,
phone tab in the UI, and it
so,
makes it
so when
really,
someone
really
rings
easy.
you through that, it rings your Zoom app, so it'll pop up and you'll see like the Zoom app
Yep, the soft
kind of
phone's
thing.
built right into it. The dialer's built right into that, all that kind of
Ah,
stuff. So it
that's
it
actually
makes it
neat. I
easy.
did not know that.
Um, yeah, and but if you are just starting out and you're using Google Workspace for your email, or you're using Microsoft 365 for your business email and that kind of stuff, and file storage and stuff with Google Drive or OneDrive, Teams and Google Chat, like they work really well for teleconferencing. So there's no real reason to branch out from that unless you have a strong personal preference like I did, where Zoom was a tool that I wanted to use. I was willing to pay for it, but it was also the phone system that I wanted to use because I've deployed it in the past in my career. I was familiar with it. I knew that that's the one I wanted. Uh, so that's why I went with those. Um, and they're not terribly expensive. VoIP phone lines, if you're paying for them, probably $20 a month. Uh, for telephone service, a little bit less expensive than cell phones for VoIP. And then, but if you've got a cell phone service, you can always add that extra line as well, usually for a minimal cost with your carrier. Anything we missed with those before we move on to accounting stuff? Because that's a big one.
I will tell you what, uh, a lot of tools all integrate back into QuickBooks, but again, this is one of those things. I use a digital bank. They don't have a brick and mortar. Um, that's all there. But for accounting purposes, my invoices literally leave from my bank and offer you to pay via there are multiple methods, PayPal, Stripe, whatever, right there in the invoice, and it all goes directly back to the bank. It's all integrated together. I pay myself from that. I don't just go swipe the card. I have the credit card from that, from Chase. I swipe that card. I pay from that bank account, from the accounting. Um, from a software perspective, I left it built into my bank because they offered it, and that was my best choice.
I'm using QuickBooks. Um, and the reason I picked QuickBooks, there were two reasons. One is, with my business school background, um, I had some accounting classes as part of my uh, curriculum for my business operations degree. So I already had some experience from those classes and knew what I was looking at from an accounting perspective. And like I wanted to be able to have a tool that was going to let me do get under the hood, understand fully what's there in the chart of accounts and be able to work with stuff. And it would present things in the way that I was expecting them to be presented rather than trying to abstract things away from me to make it easy. Because there's other tools like FreshBooks that are very easy to use, but they kind of abstract some stuff away from you in the process. So when my wife was using FreshBooks for her company, I struggled a little bit to help her with some of her bookkeeping because FreshBooks in the UI, the user interface, didn't always present things the way that I would expect them to see them, and they didn't
Interesting.
always make sense to me. And I wanted to dig underneath and understand what was actually going on, and I couldn't do that. Whereas QuickBooks lets me do that. Um, but for somebody like her who didn't have that kind of background, like she preferred that more simplified UI. And FreshBooks works great if you're a service-based business and you're primarily doing expense tracking and invoicing and processing your payments. Uh, you get into more advanced
Yeah.
stuff with inventory and that type of stuff, like then it starts to break down a little bit because uh, and you can integrate a lot of apps with FreshBooks as well. So it's a great place to look if you're just starting and you're not like super familiar with business accounting and that kind of stuff already. Um, the other reason why I did go why I wanted to go with QuickBooks was because there isn't an accountant or tax person out there who's not familiar with that tool. And at any point, if I need an accountant or my tax person or a virtual assistant or somebody to help me with some of my bookkeeping, I know for a fact that I will be able to find somebody who can help me that already knows that tool well, and they're not going to be trying to learn it in the process. You can start with Excel. I couldn't imagine trying to track everything in Excel. For what I pay to QuickBooks monthly fee, I am saving myself multiples of that amount of dollars
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
my time that I can now be billable because I'm not trying to create my own organizational system in Excel for free. So free is only free if you don't value your time is a very important thing to remember in business. If this is a business and not a hobby, free is only free if you don't value your time. And a lot of techies struggle with that. I struggled with that at first as well. What else with accounting? The integrations are big. Oh, we talked about bank accounts. in the early episode
Yes.
of one of the first things you do when you get your LLC or EIN is you create your business bank account.
Yes.
Maybe you get your business credit card, sync those to
Yes.
QuickBooks, sync those to FreshBooks, sync those to whatever platform you choose. Or if you're using your bank's system, that's great because it's already integrated. But like everything goes through it. Like everything has an entry, everything has a receipt or some sort of paperwork with it. And just
Yep.
like if you stay on top of that, you're going to be in really good shape when it comes tax time. That every expense is categorized because you know that it always goes through your business bank account or your business credit card. Those always go to your bookkeeping tool. So you can know everything you spent is there. I don't use cash. I don't use my personal card because I don't want to track that stuff and have to remember, oh
Yep.
crap, I forgot to reimburse myself for this thing that I bought. So I make sure that they always go through those cards, which helps them funnel right into the tool. Everything is right there. I can't forget something.
And like we talked about, Chase and my bank, though I use the bank, Chase and the bank literally have export functionalities. One of the export functionalities, document, Excel, PDF, QuickBooks, like both of them. Like so they know as well. So, from an accountability perspective, accounting is important. And again, when you if you're going to file taxes on your own, I wouldn't do that anymore. But if you're going to, this will make your life so much easier because every tool that you're going to use will also, once you hit, hey, export, upload, will just, it's going to know. But as you said too, there's not a single professional. My tax person has asked me to stop using spreadsheets and start using QuickBooks. So I have this year. I have the minimum subscription, and they are all hooked in, and I can do X number of imports and things like. So it's one of those things like, hey, if it's gonna, and guess what though, you get to expense it. It's another expense. You get to write it off. Do it. It's if you're making the money and you got a few dollars to spare, as you said, it's going to allow you to be a little bit more billable instead of, I don't know, chasing down that one receipt. Hey, you know what? You took the picture of it, you uploaded it, or you've got evidence of it on the proper credit card because you're doing it right. You don't have to chase it down. It's right there. Boom. You know what the expense is. You're good.
Yeah, speaking of chasing things down, one of the things that inevitably in small business you had chased down is signatures on contracts. Um,
Yes.
you get a proposal out there, you get the statement of work or the contract out to the client, and they're reviewing it and that kind of stuff. There's always some back and forth, uh, redlining the contract, whatever. Pro tip: I didn't actually plan to mention this in this, but redlining a contract is a very normal part of business. Don't feel guilty about redlining contracts. Don't be offended if somebody comes back with changes to your contracts,
Oh
and
no.
don't feel
Yeah.
guilty when you review contracts of making modifications and going through and redlining. For folks that may not know, that's when you turn on track changes, like in Microsoft Word, and it shows up in red, and you're making your suggested edits to then send back for them to review and accept into the contract. Uh, I've come across some small business owners before who have been very offended that I have wanted to redline a contract. Even had one that felt that their contract was so good that I must be up to something if I wanted to make any changes, and they didn't trust it, and I just had to
Really?
let that deal go away because it was just too bizarre. So yeah,
Huh.
that's an important thing. But signatures, when you're fully virtual, a lot of folks don't have printers and stuff, which means they may not have scanners anymore. So yes, you can do, the traditional, you sign it with a paper and pen and scan it and send it back and they sign it, the old way. Or you can use things like DocuSign and, other tool. PandaDocs is another one that I see folks using a lot to do e-signatures. I find those really streamline stuff to the point where it is also worth that, $20 a month or whatever it is for that service, so that when I need to do stuff, like it's all digital, it's all electronic. I don't have to have hard copies. I don't have to deal with printing it off and then getting back to my desk to scan it and send it back to them, um, and all that kind of stuff. So e-signature, it's a tool that I would recommend if you get to a point where like you're actually signing several contracts, a year, maybe, once, twice a month, whatever. It's probably worth spending the money just to streamline that process and make that easier.
Yes.
Any additional thoughts on that one?
Oh, totally. So here's the beautiful part. If you're using the right content management system, I have an entire automation built around when you send me an email and we agree, I can push a button inside of my Google Workspace that then goes up to my customer management process that takes, the name and correlates everything and then goes over and says what, it'll say, hey, what are you doing? Drops down. I select everything, then goes over to the e-sign form. Again, insert brand here, and fills out the form and then sends it over for them to sign. And then as soon as they sign it, again, allows time for them to, hey, I don't like these lines. Again, PandaDocs is great. DocuSign is great. Adobe Sign is great. Zoho Sign is great. Dropbox Sign, I've used it a few times. Dot Loop is fine. I've used that for other real estate deals, things like that. So there's so many of them out there, and they all at this point have an API that you can kind of build into this automation, and then you let them make those decisions. Again, it's interesting that they were a little upset with you redlining certain things because hey, there's just some things that in my state of Virginia matter to me. But if you're in California, for instance, a state that values privacy and other consumer things, it may not be relevant. So why even have it in the contract? Because if I try to use it, whatever. Oh, forced arbitration in my state. Well, certain states won't allow forced arbitration in certain other states. Like so. Why have it in the contract when it's going to be useless or bad things or like, hey, no, I don't agree to your forced arbitration in your state. Let's do this like a companies and let's do this in the states where hey you're registered or oh you're in Florida but you registered your business in Delaware, so why don't we do it in where your business is registered or the appropriate things anyway. But when you build in the automation, and back to the point, when you build in the automation, you hit go, and then it sends it out. They can do their work. It signs. I get an email. They get an email. We both get copies of it, and then then I can get a statement of work out. I'll get the approval. I'll look at what they wanted. Again, I'll go through, make sure that the statement of work reflects what we agreed on during a conversation. It'll go out to them. They'll thumbs up that. The statement of work will go out. They'll sign, then they'll agree to, master services agreement, statement of work, and then suddenly when they're done with that, hey, before any work gets done, again from a pen testing perspective, I also want rules of engagement. All that gets put in this automation process. So building out that pipeline for me has been really nice because again, that kind of goes to making my life easier.
I haven't needed to do any automation yet, but I kind of look forward to the day when I eventually do. Administrative overhead for the kind of peer consulting stuff that I do is really so minimal that there isn't a lot to automate. So scheduling is one of the challenges that I run into
Yes.
because I need my clients to be able to schedule time with me easily, especially for my pure advisory uh, contracts. That if a client needs to talk to me this week, that there's an easy way for them to grab 30 minutes, and we don't have to, and I don't end up blocking because I'm in meetings with other clients, and they're waiting for me to tell them availability. Uh, I've struggled a little bit with this, like handing somebody a Calendly link to schedule,
Yeah.
because it always seems like a little bit heavy-handed, or not heavy-handed, but like one-sided, where you put the burden on them to go pick a time.
Right.
But for the way that I'm using it, I can provide it to the client during a kickoff, an engagement kickoff of, as we talk through, communications protocols and that kind of stuff. Here is your window into my availability. Here's how you book time with me. Um, and you can, whatever you need. Now, I'm hourly, so if they book time with me, I'm going to bill them for it. So, I'm cool with that. But I want to make that easy. So I use that. I also tell them, though, like, we don't have to book through that tool. Like, that's just your window into my availability. If we want to still schedule the old fashioned way and just double check and say, yep, this works good for me, and send an old fashioned calendar invite, that works. Uh,
Yeah.
I've also given my Calendly invite to other channel partners, so that they can facilitate scheduling meetings with me and their clients so that they can see my availability easily. Uh, and the reason it's a challenge is, like, my main calendar at Focivity, like, I live by that. And that's the only one that has the whole picture of my week in it. So even clients or channel partners that onboard me, give me an email address in their system and that kind of stuff, I always have to remind them, like, if you look in your system, my schedule availability is only going to show the stuff with your organization. It doesn't show anything for all the rest of my clients. So you must look at the Calendly to see it. And it's the only way I've found so far really efficiently to do this. And Microsoft has a built-in thing in M365 for this that will do the same thing as Calendly. People can self-serve schedule with you. I'm just using the free version of Calendly, and it works great. Um, I just have it set up for people to grab a 30-minute window. Like, I'm not doing multiple time things. I do have it configured to not create back-to-back meetings. So if I've got a meeting, it won't offer the half-hour block immediately before or after it when people look. So it does artificially uh, reduce my availability a little bit. But I find that if people are self-serving on my calendar, like, I don't want them to be able to stack up back-to-back meetings. Um, it doesn't offer times on Fridays, for instance. So, people can't just go grab time on a Friday if I'm using Friday as a catch-up day, or, a day out of the office or something. Uh, but yeah, scheduling has been tricky, and using the free version of Calendly, like, it's been so valuable to me. I don't know. What are you using? Any tools like that for your stuff, Joe?
I have multiple. Depends again on need. Calendly actually does allow for, going back to the automation thing, some automations. And depending on which tooling and capabilities, Zoho has a scheduling capability. Microsoft has a built-in scheduling capability now, and actually so does Google Workspace. So it all depends on essentially how they're contacting me. But yeah, I've used a lot of scheduling stuff. Unfortunately, I don't have one calendar to rule them all, which has caused not necessarily conflicts, but definitely things to have been like showing up last minute. Because the one thing to rule them all is this little 8-inch by 3.5-inch device in my hand. This knows all. um, the little cell phone, but everything else, yeah. So, but and it's very interesting. So, you know, I've actually so because of email and everything we've talked about, I've been eyeballing because Proton Mail has been growing. They now do they've email for well over a decade, I believe. I've been using them for at least a decade. But now they have Drive, Calendar, which has scheduling functionality. They have good business functionality, so you can white label so I can have Joe B at nextgenredteam.com through that. And then so they're building out a solid arsenal through that. So as they start to add more functionality, that I'm curious from the API perspective, like if they'll build in signing into like Dropbox. Well, if I send a PDF out and say, hey, here's the signature block, if they start building out secure things like that, I will really have to invest in that. But like, again, it's one of those things, like, yeah, with the idea of scheduling time, the one calendar to rule them all, I unfortunately have not done, but book.me I've seen. Uh, there was another one that I was eyeballing recently that actually had lots of integrations. I'd have to look them up, but again, it's very important that, again, as a consultant, you do those things. And I will echo, by the way, I do love Calendarly, because you can say, do not allow back to back. Ensure that you can just carve out, hey, Fridays are no go, like unless they have this link, or you can create private links, and I do have the paid version of Calendly. Um, you can create unique links. Not that I'm trying to give what do you call it, preference to certain customers or clients, but hey, as you said, it's my catch up day. This is like kind of an emergency link only, I've got those for certain folks who pay for a premium level service. But again, it's one of those things that hopefully folks don't need to use it, because I do have retainer capabilities for DFIR or incidents and things like that. But yeah, there's so many good services out there now. But definitely a single calendar to rule them all is my one weakness right now.
So, social media management tools, that's one that can be huge for your marketing and sales efforts. You can do a ton of stuff with automation with these. I'm not getting that advanced with them, but I
Yeah.
have found that the social media management platforms have been something that have saved me an incredible amount of time, because manually posting stuff to multiple profiles for the business and for the
Yeah.
podcast, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, what have you, gets really, really time consuming really fast. So
Yes.
using these tools, again, for less than $20 a month for many of them, you can go in and you can batch time and spend a couple hours on a Friday just writing up your posts, getting them loaded and queued up. And that's basically what I was doing. I backed off on social media a lot because I've been so billable lately that I haven't needed to push on sales much. Uh, so it was one of the first things to go. But what I used to do was, like, I would sit down for a couple hours on a Friday, and I would come up with what are my posts for the next month, and I would queue
Ah,
up posts for a schedule, a couple days a week, for the next month, and get that all scheduled. And then it would just go without me. And I didn't have to worry about it for another month when I would sit down and write up stuff for the following month again. Uh,
okay.
so at the moment, I'm using Loomly for that, Loomly. I used Buffer before that. Buffer worked pretty well, but when I added the podcast, I needed more social media accounts, and Loomly's pricing scaled better for me when all of a sudden I had like 6 or 8
Doubled.
social media accounts that I
Yeah.
needed to post to instead of 3. Um, so that was one area where I switched from Buffer to Loomly. There's a ton of these tools out there, though, and they're all pretty reasonably priced. Uh, but they're worth looking at. If, like, at first, post manually, figure out what your pattern is and that kind of stuff, and do the stuff organically. But if you start feeling like posting to social media is becoming a chore for your business, it's taking time that you should be doing other things. That's when that, free isn't free if you don't value your time. That's when you can then look to see, okay, what am I willing to spend to make this easier? And that, $20 a month will probably look really cheap at that point.
Yeah. Yep. I don't have any capabilities on that. I've not used social media for any of my marketing. Most of my marketing has been word of mouth and
Okay.
asking friends, "Hey, do you got any work?" So
Most of my, oddly enough, has been through the accidental CISO Twitter account, the pseudo
yeah, yeah,
anonymous, face of a podcast host, I guess. But most of it comes through that, actually, not through the business accounts,
huh?
but the business accounts lend credibility, and they do
Yeah,
give me kind of an official place to publish stuff from the business still. So I still do that. I think the last tool, at least we had in our list, that are big ones, is project and task tracking, because that's something else. Is when you're running a business, you have internal things you're working on. So you got internal projects, internal tasks. Doing your expenses is a task. It's not really a project, but you might have project, some new product development thing that you're coming up with, a new service offering. Um, and then you've got your clients' projects. and proposals you got to put together. Like you've got all these things, keeping track of all that stuff gets really hard. Uh, if you're just trying to do it all in your head or just write it down on paper and sticky notes or a notebook or something like that. I find that a tool for that really, really helps me. And again, luckily these can be really inexpensive. I was using the free version of Trello up until very recently. I
Mm-hmm.
only started
Mm-hmm.
paying for it because I wanted the feature that would basically give me a Gantt chart view of a Trello board, because I realized this is the tool that I want for creating roadmaps. I put together the roadmap initiatives, like a card in a Trello list for each of the roadmaps, and put the dates on it, the tentative start and target dates, line them up in priority order, whatever. Click a button, and now I have a Gantt chart view that I can share with a client for a visual, traditional overtime roadmap. And I'm not screwing around with trying to create these things manually in Excel, which I've
Yep.
done with coloring cells or through lucid charts or something, or through shapes and things in PowerPoint to create these roadmaps. And it's really fiddly. And then you go into Trello, all you got to do is change a date, or you go to the roadmap view, the Gantt chart view, and just drag a card around and move it while you're talking with the client to finalize a roadmap that you're helping them put together. Uh,
Yeah.
it makes
Yep.
things so much easier. So yeah, Trello has been phenomenal for me. Jira, if I started having more people working with me and needing to do a little more traditional project management for more people, I might move to Jira. Um, I've got clients that use Asana. They really like Asana. A lot of small business folks, I've heard really great things about Asana as well. Um,
Hmm.
Never personally used it, but my clients that use it really seem to love it. A lot of folks are using Notion these days for all sorts of stuff.
I actually use Notion. I use the GTD get things done design on it. If I can't do it, so A, absolutely must get done. B, nice to get done. C, get done. D, for delegation. So that would be outsourcing for us. So hey, it's just something that I can write up. If not, yeah, I outsource it, kind of thing. But yeah, for my project management, project tracking, a lot of my automations actually specifically through Notion. I put notes in there and then say, hey, you'll right click on it, say create a automation out of this, or put it in a specific, right click on it and put a specific tag with it, and then it'll read through, create it, and then that's what'll create the automation out of it.
Outsourcing is kind of huge. Like in business, there's a few things like you really need to outsource. Like you should have a lawyer.
Absolutely.
If you're not a lawyer, don't pretend to be a lawyer. Have a lawyer. Outsource the lawyer stuff to the lawyer. Let them help you come up with a contract template that you're going to use. Let them help you review, especially if they're big contracts. Uh, once you get these templates done, largely, like there's not a huge amount of stuff you have to go back and forth on. Uh, but lawyers are very, very helpful, and they're people talk about them being very expensive, and when you look at their hourly rate, they seem expensive. But when you realize like most of them bill in like 15-minute increments, and these things that you need them to do don't necessarily take them all that long to do, and it's a one and done thing that you just have
Yep.
access to, it's not that bad. And CPAs are the same way. They are surprisingly affordable. And if you've got your business set up in your QuickBooks and you're like, this is just really vexing to me, I don't understand the bookkeeping, I don't want to do this, I'm going to screw this up, talk to a CPA. They can have one of the bookkeepers on their team provide you services pretty affordably again. Um, and depending on what your time is worth and how you value that, you may have to look and see, where your business is at that point, if you can afford that. But like if you've got to a point where you've got enough bookkeeping to do that it's becoming a burden, or you're really worried about messing it up, because like if you make a $50 mistake, the IRS is not worried about that. Like, I mean, I can't speak for the IRS, but like the IRS would be silly to worry about a $50 mistake. What they pay their people to audit and like do all this stuff, like $50 is nothing to them. So like if you are doing your books and it's like I'm really, really particular about my books. But I at the same time, like I've heard people talk about like hiring bookkeepers, and one of the questions is like, you've got a $1.07 difference that you're trying to find. What, how do you troubleshoot that? But what they're really looking at is how long is this person going to waste before they say it's not worth fixing $1.07 mismatch or whatever. Like,
Agreed.
so yeah, but a CPA, somebody to help with bookkeeping is definitely good for uh, outsourcing social media management. I am finally to a point in mine where I've got somebody lined up. They're going to help me with some social media stuff for my business
Nice.
to help take that off of my plate. And I'm really excited to do that because I want my business to be more present on social media, and I just haven't had the time to do it. Um, and
It's a
so
good way to do it.
that's one area that I'm looking at. And then a lot of folks are using virtual assistants
I like helping
these
hands.
days. Uh, I haven't done that yet, just because, again, like there's not that much in my like the administrative overhead in my pure consulting business isn't that much. Um, I'm not having trouble with scheduling where I need an assistant to help with scheduling, and pretty much anything else that I would need help with by the like it ends up being edge case stuff that it's going to take me longer to figure out how to explain to them what needs done and provide them the support they need to do it than it would have taken me to do that one-off edge case thing myself, um, because I don't have repeatable stuff. And so I think the big thing with virtual assistants, and you mentioned helping hands there, um, I think the big thing with virtual assistants is bringing them in for like known, well-defined, repeatable tasks. Um, if you have stuff like that, like it can be really, really great to get help from a virtual assistant for those types of things that you can document. This is the task. Here's exactly what you need to do. Uh, and that sort of thing. If you get these nebulous things where like they got to figure out what to do and then do it, you're probably not going to have as good a time with a virtual assistant with those types of things.
Agreed. Agreed.
I don't know. Thoughts with your experience on virtual assistants?
Again, I've used mine to do more like things like finding a local place near a client to do to set up certain things. Again, being visually impaired, hey, here's a bunch of words, put them in a presentation and make it look good. Um, I'm less capable of doing those things. Less, I care to a degree less about the aptitude. I've got a couple of folks now that I go to just directly because I've worked with them several times, and I say, hey, you're a tech writer. Hey, you're this. I know your hourly rate is $50 an hour, $100 an hour, $150 an hour, whatever it is. I know that this person is good for this thing. Hey, I need a presentation. Use the slide deck we've agreed on. Here's the words. Put it in there. In whatever order. Get it to me this date, and it's gotten done. Hey, helping hands. Hey, I'm going to this place in a different state. I'm not familiar with the area. Can you, get somebody familiar with the area? Let me know a spot to go to pre-meeting that I might be able to run into them. Yeah, just again, interesting little things that I've used before. But from those perspectives, again, that's helped me as a more of a person thing than just a business person.
So we're close on time here, but I want to cover because we've been talking about bookkeeping a lot, and I just want to cover the basics of bookkeeping that folks will need
Yeah.
to know at a very, very high level. Like we're not going to get into double entry accounting and debits and credits and all that stuff here,
No,
but
no.
like what you're dealing with bookkeeping is money coming in, money going out, and what's left over. You have money coming in as your revenue, money going out as your expenses, and what's left over is your profit. Uh, and And it's important that all of your revenue and expenses are tracked accurately in your bookkeeping system so that it can accurately tell you what your profit is. Because if you don't know what your profit is, you're going to have a hard time knowing what you can pay yourself. You're going to have a hard time knowing what you owe in taxes, uh, those types of things. You're going to have a hard time knowing what you may be able to budget for other things when it comes time to bring in a virtual assistant, when it becomes time to add a new tool. Can I afford it? If you don't have your stuff in there so that the tool can tell you what your profit is and your cash flow and that kind of stuff looks like, you're going to have a harder time making those decisions. So, with revenue for a service-based business, generally you're going to invoice the client and then they pay you. It really is that simple.
Yep.
They can pay you with a check. A lot of these bookkeeping things like FreshBooks and QuickBooks and such, like, they can handle electronic payments as well through their. Some people use Stripe,
Yep.
PayPal, those kind of things. But like, as long as those things all get integrated back into your bookkeeping system so that it doesn't become a chore to enter that stuff in, it makes it really easy. So, you do a proposal, they get a signed contract, you send them an invoice for the deposit or whatever, or you do the work and they pay you depending on how you structure it. But uh, yeah, you do it right through your banking system. You're not coming up with. You could create an invoice in Excel, a template, or Microsoft Word, or Google Docs, or whatever. But if one of these tools can do that, why waste your time manually creating these things when you can go in, click right through, send the invoices, and then that program will keep track of what invoices are still outstanding, what's been paid, what hasn't. You can report on that stuff. You can send statements to your clients if they get behind for what invoices haven't been paid. It makes things so much easier with that. Like I said, with the expenses, as long as everything runs through your business cards or your business bank account, it's synced in, everything's there. And all you got to do is make sure that you're attaching your receipts or invoices from other vendors to those things to track so that you've got the paperwork. And if, the tax man at some point ever wants to see it, like, it's all there. Like, any expense in there, they can click through and they can see the receipt. And it's right there. Um, Now, with your expenses, though, you do get into some of this stuff of, what can you expense? What can you not? It generally needs to be things that are required to run the business. Uh, you can't go expense your kids' shoes. You can employ your children, but you can only pay them if they're actually doing some sort of work for you. You can't just put them on salary for doing nothing. What else, permissible versus defensible. So I think really
Yes.
that's where it comes down to. Like, if I try to stay really strict, like, every business expense is something that I can justify 100%. Like, I don't want to have to get caught arguing whether something was, a real business expense or not. Like, I keep everything really, really clean. But other folks that maybe don't stay as strict to that as I do, they're going to have to look at, can I expense this? Maybe the answer is yes. Can I actually defend that expense if pressed by the IRS? Maybe, maybe not. And they may decide to take that risk. I don't know. But, as you're doing expenses and that sort of thing, like, make sure that they are all valid business expenses for things that the business is actually needing and using. Now, you have a lot of latitude in deciding what that is. So there is that, but try not to. My advice to folks is, like, don't get creative with your expenses, because just like, mixing personal and business accounts and piercing the veil, you can also get into trouble by doing personal expenses out of your business account, trying to call them business expenses. So this is an area, again, if you're not sure, having a lawyer or having a CPA that you can reach out to ask them about it is going to be really helpful.
Massive helpful. Yep.
And then profit, what's left after that? Like, this is what's left after your revenue has come in, you've subtracted your business expenses. If you are an S Corp, and you're paying your own salary as a W-2 employee of your business, like we talked about in one of the earlier episodes, that is a expense to the business. Um, if you are just a straight LLC, you're not an S corp. You can take your owner's draw on that, but you got to make sure you set your taxes aside out of that because you'll be paying taxes. Uh, but you can pay yourself with the draw, pay yourself with the salary. You can do profit distributions as well if you're an S corp paying yourself. All of those things are deductions for the business. They may not be deductions for you personally. So that's also something to keep in mind. One area, though, if your profit builds up in your business account towards the end of the year, if you don't have a business expense for it, an LLC or an S corp with S corp election, we talked about earlier, those are pass through entities. So you cross that
Yep.
tax year date from December 31st to January 1st. If the business hasn't spent it, that money's yours personally now. um, Again, we're not talking about C corps; those are different. There are other situations where the company has its own money and it doesn't pass through. But for what folks have here, LLCs and LLCs with S corp elections that are going to be the most common that our audience is going to do, those are pass through entities. So as you get to the end of the year, if you've got profit built up that you don't necessarily you don't need to pay yourself, but you don't have other business expenses you need to invest in for the business within that tax year. If you've got like a solo 401k, your business can contribute to your solo 401k account. That is a business expense, and that can be done pre-tax if you've got a traditional account. So it does give you a place to take some of that profit and move that off as a business expense and not have to pay taxes personally on that if you don't need that money at the end of the year.
That's a good place to put it. Yep.
Yeah.
That's where I'd recommend putting it.
Any other thoughts on revenue, expenses, and profit that
Oh,
are key things that I left out?
no, I don't think you missed anything from a high level. Again, I think from a critical standpoint, bookkeeping goes all the way back to, making sure you have a bookkeeping capability, making sure that you understand the difference between revenue, expenses, and profit, right? Revenue does not equal profit. You still have expenses. And did you put that on a credit card? You have to pay that credit card off. Um, that doesn't mean it's a expense to the company in the sense of paying the credit card off and with the interest. You now need to show that you used you spent $1,000 and then paid $1,004. So keep those things in mind. It's from an expense perspective that make sure again that you're defining expense for your company properly. Yes, that new laptop, it's around Christmas, it's on sale. That could be an expense to your company. Make sure you're using it the majority of the time for work reasons. Again, as a pen tester, I do need a laptop with a graphics card. But I also could use it for occasional gaming. But yes, most of the stuff when I purchase things this year, for example, I've made a couple dollars. But then what did I buy for my expenses? I have a Chromebook. Why did I buy a 200 and whatever it was, 270, 200, $300 Chromebook? Well, I have a client who actually wanted me to do some Chrome testing. That actually fell through. I didn't get the job, or well, they didn't want me to test the Chrome application anymore. But I bought the device. Well, guess what? I bought the device. I'm going to expense it this year. I'm going to tell my CPA I spent $300 at Best Buy with on my company card, have already paid it off. Here you go. I have a new asset for the company that I would like to write off. Work with your CPA because you can either write it off all in 1 year or amortize it over several years, up to 5. That's all. It depends on how you are running your business. Me, again, money in, money out. Again, profit or revenue, expense, profit. I wait till the end of the year, unless I need money. By need money, like, oh shoot, I'm going to, um, a conference and I would like to have some spending money of my own, I'll do an owner's draw and pull money out and then be aware that at the end of the year I will be paying taxes on it either way, right? So if now, and that's if I'm like doing touristy stuff and not like, oh, it's for the if I go to the conference, right, that's going to be, hey, that can be an expense because I'm there for next gen red team or dead pixel purposes. So hey, I'm here to mentor, I'm here to do things. I can write the hotel room off. But if I'm going to go, hey, we're in Philadelphia, I want to go spend money on a bus around town to do touristy things. That's not a business expense, more or less, mostly less. But I want to use my business money to pay for that as opposed to my personal money. Well, then I got to do a draw and be aware that I'm going to be paying taxes on it. So just keep those things in mind. That's all.
One last expense type that I didn't mention because most of our listeners are going to be doing service-based businesses, but inventory is another one. But if you are doing a business that is has inventory and you're reselling something, inventory is another valid business expense. So you get to the end of the year, you need to buy more inventory. You could invest that money into inventory or as you invest throughout the year. But now tracking inventory and that kind of stuff, like you get into upper tiers of QuickBooks and stuff where it's a little more expensive than the beginner tier at 35 or whatever dollars a month. Um, Also, if you start hiring anybody and you're needing to do payroll and that kind of stuff, like QuickBooks and stuff will handle that also. But again, those are also business expenses or maybe subcontractor expenses. So those are other, valid business expenses as well that I just wanted to make sure I mentioned. So, all right, man, I think we need to wrap this one up. We've covered a lot. We've probably melted people's brains again um, with all of this information. Hopefully, we've made it easy to understand. Um, Thank you, Joe, for joining me. It's been great having you here. We've got one more episode that we'll record and get out for folks. Just a little bit talking about challenges, keys to success, resources are available, those kinds of things. We'll get into that in the next one and kind of wrap up the series. But I appreciate you jumping in and offering your perspective here for everybody. Uh, any final thoughts or anything before we wrap this one and call it done?
On this stuff, I mean, again, we make it sound easy. It is both simultaneously easy and hard. It's going to be a decision as you go through these podcasts. You're going to make the decision. I want a business. I don't want a business. This sounds hard. That's a lot of work.
Yep.
It is both rewarding and also self-fulfilling, but also a bit foolish, right? If just make sure again, well, we talked about this early on. Make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Initially, we started this entire conversation talking about the PRO Act specifically, which was something coming down the pipeline that was kind of to a degree potentially hurting the right to work, which would have forced some folks that were personally in independent contractor roles into sort of forcing them into roles. And we sort of talked about like, oh, well, then at the case, your opportunity would be to LLC and start your own business, and go from there. And so I think the idea still stands today, even though I think for the moment the PRO Act has been shelved. But the idea of you kind of controlling your destiny is something that the idea behind owning the business and starting the business and being one of the 70 million business owners or some large number owners in the U.S. is it's not something to be scared of. There's lots of resources out there, and as we get through this, I hope you become one of them. And I want you, as you start to hit the podcast again, I've had feedback on social media. I know you have, but tell us, as you're being successful in the fun things you're doing and you're learning, and share with us your successes and your failures. And again, if there's advice we can offer, I'm sure we both would love to offer any advice.
I think my key takeaways that I just want to reiterate for folks is free is only free if you don't value your time. And so
Yeah.
there's a lot of tools that can make running your business easier. And it's okay to give yourself permission to spend money on some of these things to make your life easier because your time is worth something. And if you're trying to run a business without the right tools, you're going to make mistakes. It's going to take you a lot longer. You'll put a lot more effort. So the right tools, make sure you solve those problems and don't waste time working on things that you shouldn't be working on or that are making it harder, and outsource the stuff that you really should. You're not a lawyer. If you're not a CPA, don't try to be a lawyer. Don't try to be a CPA, and don't run your own payroll. If you get to a point where you're an S corp and you're paying yourself as a W-2, even before you're hiring other employees, don't try to run your own payroll. Like there's too many opportunities to screw up all the taxes and stuff that go with it. Pay the extra like $30 a month or $40 a month to QuickBooks or whoever you're using to be your payroll provider, and just handle it.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's not worth the frustration. It's not worth the mistakes. It's not worth the time that you'll have to invest to unravel those mistakes, because it gets really costly when you start valuing your time. Thank you again, Joe. I appreciate it. Thank you to all of our listeners. Again, if you're still listening, thank you. Thank you. We do this for you. I hope this has been valuable. We've got one more episode in this series, and then we'll get back to the regular call-in radio stuff. So I am Accidental CISO, and until next time, stay mindful.
Don't miss our next episode. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app and follow us on social media. Visit Focivity.com/podcast. That's FOCIVITY.com/podcast for show information and links to our social media pages. This has been the Mindful Business Security Show, brought to you by Focivity.